So could you just tell me your name, what your activity, your relationship is with bees?
I'm Claire Kremen, and I'm a bee researcher.
What's the most profound lesson that you've learned from bees?
I think the most profound lesson that I've learned from bees is about how really awful our food system is. What I mean by that is that the way that we produce food, the dominant model for food production, is this industrialized agricultural model relying primarily on monocultures. And these monocultures are quite bad for native bee populations. They produce bloom usually just for about a couple of weeks a year. So this whole large area is providing some floral resources for bees at that time, but during the rest of the year, it's generally barren. There's no crop blooming, and there are no weeds blooming because of the herbicides that are used. So it's sort of a desert. In addition, there are a lot of pesticides used in these fields, and those, of course, are bad for bees. And the fields are generally tilled, so bees can't nest in these areas. So monocultures are not good for bee species, and I really had my eyes open to that by studying bees. And then I started to realize just sort of what a crazy way of producing food it is in general. The many other negative impacts it has on our environment, even the impacts that it has on farm laborers, and on our whole food system.
Can you remember a moment in which you felt particularly emotionally connected to that idea?
I think that realization began practically instantly. Probably even the first time that my colleague Bob Bugg toured me around California intensive agriculture. I'd been living in California for a couple of years, but I really hadn't spent much time in the agricultural part of California. I generally was either in a nice city like San Francisco or a beautiful natural area like Yosemite, kind of ignored the Central Valley in between. But when he took me out to these hot, dusty, very barren landscapes, I was struck by how aesthetically unpleasing they were, how unpleasant they were to be in. And as we began to do our studies, where we looked at a gradient from small, organic, diversified farms that were surrounded by natural habitat out to these large, intensive agricultural fields, I spent a lot of time in both of those types of habitats. And I collected bees and native bees in both of these habitats. And there were very few that we found in the intensive agricultural fields, and it was very, very clear what a huge impact they were having.